August 12, 30 BC. Alexandria. A woman sits inside a palace chamber draped in gold and royal purple. Two servants stand beside her. One carries a basket of figures. In less than 10 minutes, all three will be dead. But this is not the story of Cleopatra's death. It is the story of the 10 days before it, when the man who would become Rome's first emperor dismantled her without lifting a blade. No torture, no chains, no executioner. Just isolation, calculated mercy, and one silent threat. Octavian understood something Rome had perfected. Breaking a queen was more powerful than killing her. And the weapon that finally destroyed Cleopatra was not an army or poison or steel. It was a sun point 10 days earlier. On August 1st, Alexandria was already collapsing. A year before, Cleopatra and Mark Antony had wagered everything at Actium, over 500 warships, legions drawn from allied kingdoms, the largest naval force the Mediterranean had ever seen. The battle did not unravel slowly. It disintegrated in minutes. Ships burned. Formations shattered. Commanders fled. Antony abandoned his fleet to follow Cleopatra's retreat, leaving his navy to die behind him. The alliance collapsed overnight. Kings withdrew their troops. Senators switched loyalties. War chests vanished into private vaults. By the time Antony and Cleopatra returned to Egypt, their empire existed only on parchment. Now Octavian's legion stood outside Alexandria. Inside the city, betrayal spread faster than fire. Antony's cavalry defected first, riding out in perfect formation to surrender. Then the infantry, then the remaining ships, which sailed out of the harbor and laid down their weapons without a fight. The palace that once welcomed kings and philosophers emptied into silence. Officials fled. God vanished. Antony wandered deserted corridors shouting orders to men who no longer existed. Cleopatra chose a different path. She withdrew into her mausoleum, a massive stone structure built years earlier, designed to be both tomb and fortress. One entrance. Walls 3 feet thick. No windows. Inside, she gathered the wealth of a dynasty. Gold, jewels, incense, ebony, centuries of Ptolemaic power. Then she sealed the door from within. Whether she intended to burn it all or bargain with it remains unclear. What is certain is what she did next. She sent word to Antony that she was dead. Whether it was strategy or despair, the effect was immediate. Antony believed it without question. He ordered his servant Eros to kill him. Eros refused and killed himself instead. Antony took up his sword, drove it into his own body, and collapsed. The wound was mortal, but slow. As he bled out, the truth arrived. Cleopatra was alive, sealed inside the mausoleum. According to Plutarch, what followed was grimly precise. Antony was carried to the sealed structure. Cleopatra refused to open the door, not out of cruelty, but calculation. Opening it meant surrender. Instead, ropes were lowered from above. Antony's dying body was hauled up the stone walls, hand over hand, bleeding, fading, lifted into the tomb that would soon claim them both. Cleopatra and her 2 attendants hauled him up themselves, dragging a dying Roman general up a stone wall by rope while his blood soaked the rock. Antony died in her arms inside the tomb. And when his body finally went still, Cleopatra understood the truth with terrifying clarity. She was alone. No army, no allies, no kingdom. And Octavian was already inside Alexandria, deciding what to do with her. What followed was not conquest, it was calculation. Octavian did not want Cleopatra dead. Dead queens do not march. For more than a decade, Octavian had fought Romans. Civil war dressed as patriotism. To rule, he needed a different story. A living Cleopatra, paraded through Rome in chains, would rewrite everything. Rome had not devoured itself. Rome had defeated a foreign seductress, an Eastern queen who corrupted noble men. The propaganda was ready. The spectacle required a living body. But Octavian also understood the danger. Cleopatra had survived 2 decades of Roman politics. She had allied with Julius Caesar, borne his son, endured his assassination, and rebuilt her power beside Antony. She spoke 9 languages. She commanded fleets. She negotiated with kings. If given a moment, she would kill herself and destroy every ounce of treasure with her. Robbing Octavian of both wealth and theatre.so, he chose precision that he did not storm the mausoleum. He sent Gaius Proculius, an officer Antony had once trusted, a familiar name meant to lower her guard. Proculia spoke calmly at the sealed door, offering vague assurances of safety and negotiation. While Cleopatra listened, soldiers climbed the same wall Antony had been holed up. They slipped through the upper window, silently filling the interior. She realized what was happening seconds too late. Ancient sources disagree on her response. Plutarch says she reached for a dagger. Cassius Dio suggests poison. Either way, she was stopped before she could finish. She was not beaten, not chained, not bruised. She was simply transferred from mausoleum to palace, from queen to prisoner. Her captivity was immaculate. She was housed in her former chambers. She kept her servants. Her meals were prepared as before. Her jewels remained. But every door was guarded, every servant searched, every meal inspected, every personal item examined daily. Outside her room stood a guard with a single instruction. She must not die. This was not mercy. It was logistics. Octavian needed Cleopatra alive, recognizable, untouched, so she could be displayed, so no one could claim cruelty or martyrdom. But he also needed her compliant. And force would fail where something subtler might succeed. 3 days after her capture, Octavian visited her. Alone, no guards, a deliberate signal. There is no record of their exact words, only the shape of the exchange. He spoke calmly. He listened. He offered possibilities without promises, futures without guarantees. Cassius Dio records that Cleopatra spoke of Julius Caesar, of her children, of Egypt, not as a conquered land, but as a stable province that could serve Rome rather than resist it. Octavian never threatened her. He didn't need to, because somewhere in that quiet conversation, Cleopatra understood the truth he never said aloud. She might live, but her son would not rule. And once she understood that, every path forward narrowed to one. Cleopatra met Octavian with cautious composure. He offered vague assurances, hinted that cooperation might affect how her children were treated, suggested arrangements could be made, but never committed to anything specific. That ambiguity was his weapon. Trained in negotiation, Cleopatra sought leverage. She provided detailed inventories of Egypt's treasury, offered to facilitate a smooth transition of power, and emphasized her children's potential to maintain stability. Octavian took meticulous notes, thanked her politely, and left her eye in the days that followed. The pattern repeated. Brief visits, courteous exchanges, questions about treasures, palace operations, and loyalty among Egyptian officials. Each time, Cleopatra answered, believing that every piece of cooperation bought her room to maneuver. She did not realize that Octavian was not negotiating, he was cataloging. Every detail she shared about Egypt's wealth went straight to his officials for seizure. Every loyalist she named was investigated and neutralized. Every revelation became a tool for dismantling her kingdom. Her isolation deepened. Visitors were only allowed at Octavian's discretion. Messages from outside stopped. News from Alexandria, Egypt, or the wider world never reached her. She existed in a bubble of curated information, hearing only what Octavian allowed, and only what served his purpose. Then Cleopatra made her move. She stopped eating. At first, the servants noticed untouched meals. Soon, she grew visibly thinner and developed a fever. This was not a modern hunger strike with demands. It was simpler. If she died from illness or refusal, she would deny Octavian his triumph just as surely as poison could. The guards reported the situation immediately. Octavian responded swiftly, but not with force. No threats, no harsh words. According to Cassius Dio, he simply made one thing clear. Her children were in his custody. If she harmed herself, they would suffer. The consequences were never specified, but the message was unmistakable. Cleopatra resumed eating that day. The trap was complete. Death meant her children suffered. Compliance meant humiliation, erasure, eventual execution in Rome. Silence meant waiting and uncertainty. Meanwhile, Octavian consolidated everything she had built. Cleopatra had 4 children, twins Alexander Aelios and Cleopatra Selene, and a younger son, Ptolemy Philadelphus. Royal blood, but politically manageable. Octavian could control them, raise them as Romans, marry them strategically, neutralize their claims. They were not the problem. The problem was Caesar Ion, 17, son of Julius Caesar and Cleopatra, biological, not adopted. His full name, Ptolemy Caesar, also known as Caesar Ion. When Caesar was assassinated in 44 BC, his will name Octavian as adopted son and heir, giving Octavian his political legitimacy. Adoption required documentation. Biology required nothing. As long as Caesar Ion lived, Octavian's position was vulnerable. Not immediately. Caesar Ion was young, foreign, without an army, but Rome could tolerate many rivals. It could not tolerate a living son of Caesar who might one day challenge an adopted one. Cleopatra had known this since action. After the naval defeat, before returning to Egypt, she understood her son's life and Octavian's insecurities would define the fate of her dynasty. By the time Cleopatra returned to Alexandria, she had made her plans. Caesar Ion, her eldest, was sent east toward the Red Sea with tutors and guards, bound for India, far enough from Rome to be irrelevant, prosperous enough to carve out a new life. His survival became her singular goal. Everything else, the negotiations over treasure, the delicate conversations with Octavian, the careful cooperation, was theater, a ruse to buy time, to keep Octavian's attention fixed on her while her son vanished into distance and obscurity. Then the fatal message arrived. Plutarch records it with unusual specificity. Caesar Ion had reached the Red Sea. Ships were prepared. He was days from leaving Egypt entirely. But his tutor, a man named Rhodan, persuaded him to return. According to the sources, Octavian had sent word that Caesar Ion would be made king of Egypt, that cooperation would bring reward, that the son of Caesar had nothing to fear from Rome's new master. Caesar Ion believed him. He turned back toward Alexandria, a city now controlled entirely by Octavian's forces. Whether Rhodan was bribed, threatened, or simply opportunistic remains uncertain. What matters is the result. Caesar Ion returned, and with him, Cleopatra's last hope vanished. News of his return reached Cleopatra in her monitored palace chambers. No ancient text record her immediate reaction. What historians infer come from the consequences. She stopped inquiring about her other children. She stopped providing details of Egypt's treasury. She no longer engaged in Octavian's careful games of negotiation and promises. Plutarch notes that she asked for only one thing, permission to visit Mark Antony's tomb. Octavian granted it, likely believing it a sign of surrender, a grieving woman mourning her lover before accepting her fate. But Cleopatra knew something he could not. Her son was already dead. No negotiation, no cooperation could save him. Her daughters and younger son could be spared. They were children, controllable, politically useful. Caesar Ion was different. He was Caesar's blood. As long as he lived, he was a threat, and Octavian had spent years eliminating threats with surgical precision. The psychological war was over. Cleopatra had lost. Now she focused on the only victory left to her, August 12, 30 BC. Cleopatra rose in her palace chambers, bathed, and dressed in full royal regalia, gold, purple, the ceremonial robes of Egyptian pharaohs. She requested permission to visit Antony's tomb. The guards, following orders to allow reasonable requests, escorted her, accompanied only by 2 attendants to the tomb. He performed the proper rituals. She poured libations, spoke to Antony's memory, not romantically, according to Plutarch, but practically, telling him she would join him soon, that her enemies had won everything except his final surrender. She returned to the palace, ordered a specific meal, figs, bread, wine, and while she ate, wrote a letter. The letter was sealed and sent with a servant directly to Octavian. Then Cleopatra dismissed all servants except her 2 closest attendants, Iris and Charmian, women who had served her for decades. The 3 remained in the sealed chamber. What happened next is known only from its aftermath. Sometime in the afternoon, Octavian's guards became suspicious. The chamber had been silent too long. The servant who delivered the letter appeared distressed. Octavian opened it. It contained a single request, that Cleopatra be buried beside Mark Antony. He understood immediately. Guards rushed to her chambers, pounding on the doors. When they finally broke through, they found 3. When Octavian's guards finally broke into the chamber, they found 3 bodies. Cleopatra lay on a golden couch, dressed in full royal regalia, dead. Iris lay beside her, also lifeless. Charmian, barely conscious, used her last moments to adjust Cleopatra's crown, straightening it so it sat properly. One of the Roman guards, furious, demanded, "Was this well done?" Charmian, gathering her final strength, answered, a line recorded by multiple ancient sources, remembered for its gravity. It was well done, and fitting for a princess descended of so many kings. Then she died. The exact method of Cleopatra's death remains uncertain. Ancient sources suggest poison. Perhaps an ass concealed in a basket of figs, perhaps a vial hidden in a hairpin or jewelry, or possibly something else entirely. Modern scholars note that ass venom acts slowly and causes visible convulsions, making it unlikely that 3 women could die simultaneously and peacefully. It is more probable that Cleopatra employed a slow-acting poison, perhaps derived from plants or compounds available within the palace. The method matters less than the result. Cleopatra was gone. She was 39 years old. She had ruled Egypt for 21 years. She had survived Caesar's assassination, a civil war, political purges, and a collapse of her kingdom. She died on her own terms, in royal clothing, surrounded by loyal attendants. Octavian had conquered everything she had built, but she denied him the one thing he desired most, the image of her alive and broken in his triumph. According to Cassius Dio, Octavian was furious, not because Cleopatra was dead, but because she had chosen the timing and manner of her death. He had spent 10 days meticulously engineering her surrender, isolating her, controlling her information, using her children as leverage, creating a scenario in which her only logical choice seemed to be compliance. She had found the one gap he could not seal. Still, Octavian was practical. He honored her last request. Cleopatra was buried beside Mark Antony, with full ceremonial rites, prepared according to Egyptian tradition. This was not sentimentality. It was optics, demonstrating respect for tradition, mercy toward a defeated enemy, and Rome's supposed civility. Then Octavian completed what remained of his plan. Caesar Ion, sent by Cleopatra with treasure eastward toward India, was persuaded by his tutor Rhodan to return, promised kingship by Rome's heir. But Octavian had him killed, quietly and efficiently. No trial, no ceremony, no spectacle, just a removal of the political problem. Cleopatra's other children fared differently. The twins, Alexander Aelios and Cleopatra Selene, and Ptolemy Philadelphus were sent to Rome, raised under Octavian's sister. The twins eventually married into Roman nobility. Philadelphus disappears from the historical record. Likely dying young, Egypt itself became a Roman province, not governed by the Senate, but Octavian's personal territory, its grain, wealth, and power feeding his consolidation. Within 3 years, Octavian became Augustus, Rome's first emperor. Civil wars ended. The Republic transformed into an empire. His rivals were eliminated. His power became absolute, everything but one. Cleopatra's final surrender remained hers alone. Her death was not romance, not weakness. It was the last move available in a game where every other option had been methodically removed. Octavian stripped away her kingdom, her allies, her freedom, her son, but he could not strip away how her story would end. She chose a golden couch in royal regalia over chains and humiliation in Rome. Octavian conquered Egypt, but he never broke her. The most disturbing aspect of her final 10 days is not what Cleopatra did, but how methodically Octavian ensured she had no other choice.